The invincible Armada, the Zelkari Dominion, had never known defeat. Their obsidian warships carved through the cosmos like blades through silk, leaving behind the smoldering remains of civilizations that dared exist in their path. 164 worlds had fallen to their might. Not a single battle lost, not a single ship destroyed. Their military doctrine was perfection itself, honed across 3 millennia of conquest. Supreme Commander Vextor stood in the war chamber of the Dominion's capital ship, his 4 arms clasped behind his elongated torso as he studied the holographic display. The blue-green sphere rotating before him looked almost peaceful, wrapped in white clouds and surrounded by a single moon. Earth. Their next target, their 165th victory. The tactical assessment floating beside Earth's image made Vextor's mandibles click in amusement. The inhabitants of this world still used combustion engines for transportation. They launched their spacecraft with chemical rockets, fighting gravity with controlled explosions like children throwing stones at the sky. Their most powerful weapons were nuclear devices that split atoms, a technology the Zelkari had abandoned 2,000 years ago as quaint and inefficient. "Commander, the full analysis is complete," announced Sub-Commander Krelnak, entering the chamber with fluid grace. Her carapace gleamed purple under the bioluminescent lighting, marking her as one of the warrior caste as elite. She had personally led ground assaults on 37 worlds, and her tactical brilliance was matched only by her ruthlessness. Vextor gestured for her to continue, his primary eyes never leaving Earth's image. The planet seemed to mock him, with its vulnerability. Hanging there in space without a single orbital defense platform, without energy shields, without even basic plasma weaponry, it was almost insulting how unprepared they were for what was coming. "The humans, as they call themselves, have achieved basic spaceflight," Krelnak reported, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonics of barely contained excitement. "They maintain a presence on their moon and have sent primitive probes to nearby planets. Their military forces are divided into competing nation-states that frequently engage in conflicts with each other using projectile weapons and explosive devices." The absurdity of it made Vextor laugh, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the chamber. Projectile weapons. These humans still pointed tubes at each other and fired metal pellets, relying on chemical reactions and kinetic energy. The Zelkari's energy shields could withstand the combined nuclear arsenal of a dozen worlds without flickering. What could bullets possibly do against their advanced defenses? "How many ships shall we deploy for the conquest?" Krelnak asked, though they both knew the answer was largely ceremonial. Protocol demanded the question be asked and recorded for the historical archives. Every detail of their victories was meticulously documented, preserved for future generations to study and admire. Vextor turned from the display, his secondary arms unfolding to manipulate the tactical interface. Standard doctrine suggested a force proportional to the enemy's capabilities. For a world like Earth, perhaps 3 ships would suffice, maybe 5 if they wanted to be thorough. But Vextor had something different in mind, something that would cement his legacy in Zelkari history forever. "We shall deploy the entire 3rd Fleet," he announced, watching Krelnak's eyes widen in surprise. 500 warships, 50,000 of our finest warriors. We will demonstrate to the galaxy what happens when any species, no matter how primitive, exists in space claimed by the Zelkari Dominion. The sub-commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of confusion mixed with anticipation. "Commander, forgive my questioning, but is such force necessary? Our analysts project that a single dreadnought could pacify their entire world within 1 rotation of their sun." "Necessary?" Vextor's voice dropped to a low rumble that made the deck plates vibrate. "No, it is not necessary. It is a statement. When the galaxy learns that we sent 500 ships to crush a world that barely understands spaceflight, they will understand the futility of resistance. They will understand that the Zelkari do not simply conquer. We annihilate. We erase. We leave nothing but whispers of what once was." The order spread through the Dominion's military network like wildfire. The 3rd Fleet, stationed across 17 different star systems, began its convergence. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, armed with weapons that could crack continents and shields that could withstand supernovas. Their hulls were grown rather than built, using biotechnology that made them self-repairing and adaptive. They were not merely ships, they were living weapons, hungry for battle. The departure ceremony was broadcast across all Zelkari worlds. Billions watched as the Third Fleet assembled above the capital world of Zelkar Prime. The ships moved in perfect synchronization, their black hulls absorbing light like wounds in space itself. Children sang war hymns in schools. Adults gathered in public squares to witness history in the making. The 165th victory would be remembered as the day Commander Vextor demonstrated the true meaning of overwhelming force. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable conclusion, Vextor addressed his fleet through quantum communication links. His words reached every warrior simultaneously, inspiring them with visions of glory and domination. He spoke of their sacred duty to bring order to the chaos of the galaxy, to replace the weakness of lesser species with the strength of Zelkari. He reminded them of their unbroken chain of victories, each world that had fallen before them, each civilization that had been reduced to historical footnotes. Today we journey to a small blue world whose inhabitants call it Earth, Vextor proclaimed, his voice resonating through 500,000 minds. They know nothing of our approach. They have no concept of the force about to descend upon them. They believe themselves alone in the universe, safe in their ignorance. We shall teach them otherwise. We shall show them what it means to exist in a galaxy ruled by the Zelkari Dominion. The fleet began its journey through hyperspace. 500 ships moving as one through the twisted corridors between dimensions. The journey would take 3 standard rotations, barely enough time for Earth's primitive sensors to detect their approach. Not that it would matter. What could humanity do with 3 days' warning against a force that had never known defeat? The fleet traveled through the screaming silence of hyperspace. Vextor studied everything they knew about Earth. The humans had split the atom only recently in their history. They had reached their moon using computers less powerful than a Zelkari child's educational toy. They communicated using electromagnetic waves, broadcasting their presence into space like younglings crying in the dark. They were divided, chaotic, primitive. They were perfect victims. What Vextor didn't know, what none of the Zelkari could have known, was that Earth's apparent weakness was humanity's greatest deception. For decades, human scientists had detected signs of advanced civilizations among the stars. They had listened to the death screams of worlds falling to the Zelkari advance. They had analyzed, planned, and prepared. Every nation on Earth had secretly united under a single directive. When the monsters came from the stars, humanity would be ready. The facilities hidden beneath Earth's oceans, buried in mountain ranges, and disguised as ordinary research stations, contained technology that violated several theories the Zelkari considered absolute. Humans had learned to fold space not through dimensions, but around them. They had discovered how to make matter forget it existed, how to convince energy it had never been born. They had weapons that didn't destroy. They simply erased, removing targets from the universe's memory. As the Third Fleet approached the edge of Earth's solar system, Commander Vextor stood confident on his bridge, watching the stars return to normal as they dropped from hyperspace. Earth hung before them, still blue, still peaceful, still apparently defenseless. He raised his primary arm to give the order that would begin the bombardment, the order that would add another victory to their perfect record. "Commander," the sensor operator announced, confusion evident in her harmonic tones. "I'm detecting an energy signature from Earth. They appear to be broadcasting something. Put it through," Vextor ordered, amused at the thought of hearing humanity's last words. The voice that came through their speakers was calm, almost apologetic. It spoke in perfect Zelkari, despite the fact that no human should have known their language. "Zelkari Third Fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command. We've been expecting you. We've been watching you for quite some time. Your record is impressive. 164 victories, no defeats. We respect that, we truly do." The silent vanishing. The bridge of the inevitable conclusion fell silent as Admiral Chen's words echoed through the air. Commander Vextor's forearms tensed, his primary eyes narrowing to slits. No primitive species had ever addressed them in their own language. No conquered world had ever claimed to expect their arrival. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. How? Krelnak whispered, her warrior's instincts screaming warnings that her rational mind refused to accept. How could they know our language? How could they know we were coming? Admiral Chen's voice continued, still maintaining that unsettling tone of polite regret. You see, Commander Vextor, we've been listening to your conquests for the past 43 years. Every world you destroyed broadcast its death across the cosmos. Every civilization you erased sent out warnings in their final moments. We heard them all. We learned from them all. Vextor's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information. It was impossible. Earth's technology couldn't possibly detect those transmissions, let alone decode them. Their most advanced radio telescopes were toys compared to Zelkari sensors. Yet this human spoke their language fluently, knew his name, knew their fleet composition. You learned our language from dying transmissions? Vextor asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. Among other things, Chen replied. We learned your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. Did you know that your ships emit a very specific quantum signature when they exit hyperspace? It's quite distinctive. We've been tracking you since you entered the Orion Arm. The tactical display suddenly erupted with new contacts. Not ships, but something else. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to everything the Zelkari knew about physics. They appeared around the Third Fleet like stars being born, each one pulsing with power that made their sensors scream warnings. What are those? Krelnak demanded, her fingers flying across the tactical console. They're not ships, they're not stations, they're nothing, the sensor operator replied, her voice climbing toward panic. According to our instruments, they don't exist, but they're there. I can see them on visual, but every other sensor says there's nothing but empty space. Admiral Chen's voice returned, now carrying a harder edge. Commander Vextor, those are what we call reality anchors. They're going to ensure that what happens next stays in this region of space. We wouldn't want to damage the local stellar neighborhood. Vextor snarled, his patience exhausted. These primitives dared to threaten the Zelkari Dominion. They dared to speak as if they held any power against 500 warships. All ships attack formation. Target their planet. Maximum bombardment. Leave nothing but glass and ash. The Third Fleet moved with practiced precision, spreading into optimal firing positions. 500 ships aligned their weapons toward Earth, charging plasma cannons that could vaporize cities, preparing kinetic strikes that could crack tectonic plates. It should have been the beginning of Earth's end. Instead, space itself began to behave strangely. The stars seemed to flicker as if someone was adjusting the brightness of the universe. The cosmic background radiation, constant since the birth of the universe, began to pulse in patterns that spelled out words in Zelkari script. You should have stayed home. Fire! Vextor roared, his composed demeanor finally cracking. All weapons fire now. The Third Fleet unleashed hell. Energy beams that could pierce moons lanced toward Earth. Projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed screamed through space. Exotic weapons that twisted the laws of physics launched their impossible destruction. It was enough firepower to destroy Earth 100 times over. None of it reached the planet. The weapons simply ceased. Not stopped, not blocked, not deflected. They just stopped existing halfway to their target, vanishing as if they had never been fired. The energy dissipated into nothing. The projectiles faded like forgotten dreams. The exotic effects unraveled and disappeared. That's impossible, Krelnak breathed, staring at her instruments in disbelief. Nothing can just erase that much energy. It violates conservation laws, it violates everything. Admiral Chen's voice returned, now tinged with genuine sadness. Commander Vextor, I need you to understand something. We don't want to do what we're about to do. We've watched you destroy beautiful civilizations. We've heard the screams of billions. We've seen you turn gardens into graveyards. But we're going to give you one chance. Leave. Leave now. And never return to this region of space. Vextor's rage overcame his confusion. How dare these primitives issue ultimatums? How dare they speak as if they had already won? Third Fleet, prepare for close engagement. We'll tear their world apart with our bare manipulators if necessary. The fleet began moving toward Earth, accelerating to combat speed. That's when things started going wrong. Not all at once, but gradually, like a symphony slowly falling out of tune. Ships reported navigation errors. Instruments showed them moving forward while stars showed them drifting backward. Chronometers disagreed on how much time was passing. Some showed seconds, others showed hours. "Commander," the communications officer called out, her voice strange and distorted. "I'm receiving reports from the fleet, but they're not making sense. The Eternal Conquest says they've been traveling for 3 days. The Merciless Dawn reports they just left hyperspace. The Final Judgment claims they're back at Zelkar Prime." Space around the Third Fleet began to fragment. Not physically, but conceptually. Each ship existed in its own pocket of reality, connected but separate, like pages in a book that someone was slowly tearing apart. The stars multiplied and divided. Some ships saw Earth as a blue marble, others saw it as a gas giant. Still others saw nothing but empty space where the planet should be. "What are you doing to us?" Vexistor demanded, his voice breaking as fear finally overcame pride. "We're showing you what humanity learned in the dark," Admiral Chen replied. "While you were conquering worlds with brute force, we were learning to think differently. We discovered that reality isn't as solid as most species believe. It's more like a consensus, an agreement between matter and energy about how things should be. And we learned how to disagree." The fragmentation accelerated. Ships began to flicker in and out of existence, there one moment and gone the next, only to reappear light years away before vanishing again. The inevitable conclusions bridge twisted and warped, becoming 1,000 different versions of itself, simultaneously. Vextor saw himself giving orders, following orders, dying, being, born existing and not existing all at once. "You want to know our weapons?" Chen's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "We don't have weapons, we have arguments. Arguments with physics about what's possible. Arguments with time about when things happen. Arguments with space about where things are. And we're very, very persuasive." The Third Fleet was coming apart, not through destruction but through dispersal. Ships were being scattered across space and time, each one flung to a different corner of the galaxy, a different moment in history. Some appeared near dead stars that wouldn't be born for billions of years. Others materialized in the empty void between galaxies. A few found themselves orbiting Zelkar Prime, but in an era before the Zelkari had evolved. Vextor watched his perfect fleet, his 500 instruments of death, simply fade away like a bad dream. The bridge around him grew transparent, less real with each passing moment. He could see through the bulkheads to space beyond, space that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper as his own existence became uncertain. "How can primitives do this?" "Because we're not primitives," Admiral Chen replied, her voice the only solid thing left in Vextor's dissolving reality. "We're just very good at pretending. We learned that lesson from our own history. Appear weak when you are strong. Let the enemy come to you. And never, ever show your true capabilities until you have no choice." The last thing Commander Vexitor saw before his ship ceased to exist in any meaningful way was Earth, still blue, still peaceful, still hanging in space as if nothing had happened. Then reality politely disagreed with his existence, and he was elsewhere, else when, else if. The reality anchors around Earth powered down, their work complete. 500 Zelkari ships had entered the solar system. None remained. They hadn't been destroyed. Destruction would have left debris, energy signatures, some evidence of their fate. Instead, they had been scattered across the cosmos like seeds, on the wind, each one alone, powerless and very far from home. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Earth Defense Command Center, a facility that existed in 13 dimensions simultaneously, most of which humanity had discovered by accident while trying to develop better wireless internet. She watched the empty space where the Third Fleet had been, feeling the weight of what they'd done. "Send a message to Zelkar Prime," she ordered her staff. "Let them know their fleet is alive but scattered. If they want them back, they'll have to collect them. It should only take a few thousand years if they hurry. The Zelkari Dominion never sent another fleet toward Earth. They marked the entire Orion Arm as a forbidden zone, a place where reality itself had become humanity's weapon. The story spread across the galaxy, whispered in the dark between stars. Earth, the primitive world that had pretended weakness while developing weapons that didn't destroy but simply convinced the universe that targets had never existed in the first place. And humanity? They returned to their pretense, broadcasting radio signals and launching chemical rockets, maintaining the facade of a species just beginning to explore space. But now the galaxy knew better. The primitives of Earth weren't primitive at all. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had learned to argue with reality itself and win. The legend grew with each telling. The Zelkari Third Fleet, 500 ships strong, sent to conquer a defenseless world. None returned. Not because they were destroyed, but because Earth had politely disagreed with their presence, and the universe had taken humanity's side in the argument. In the deepest archives of Zelkar Prime, sealed away from public view, Commander Vextor's final transmission played on endless loop. A warning to future generations, a reminder of the day their perfect record was broken. His words, distorted by dimensional displacement, carried a simple message. Do not go to Earth. They have made reality itself their weapon. They have turned existence into a choice, and they choose for their enemies not to be. The cosmos had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity didn't need superior firepower or advanced technology in the traditional sense. They had something far more terrifying, the ability to convince the universe that problems had never existed in the first place. And in the dark between stars, wise species whispered a new saying. Never attack Earth. They don't defeat you. They simply disagree with your existence, and reality takes their side.